Hello, everybody. We want to do a quick little straw poll. We're thinking of maybe doing for a special event an in-person podcast taping, and we're wondering how many people in the Portland metro area would be interested in attending. This would be a free event, and we would just record the podcast in front of a live audience so you guys can see what it's like to, kind of be behind the scenes. So let us know if you'd be interested so that we can get a venue that would be big enough to hold everybody, and we will put something like that together. So email me at christy@dodgemediaproductions.com. That email will be in the show notes, and just shoot me an email and say, I'd be there.
Dodges never stop, and neither do our listeners.
You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christy and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Dodge Movie Podcast. This is episode 95 and our month celebrating all of our Jewish friends and Hanukkah. We are talking about The Jazz Singer, which came out, the second Jazz Singer, which came out in 1980. The director is Richard Fleischer, who we know from Soylent, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Red Sonja from 1985.
Ooh, Bridget Nielsen.
Yeah.
Danny Bonaducci loves Bridget Nielsen. So does Sylvester Stallone.
Good little fun fact there, Mike.
Yeah. Timely pull, right?
Yeah. Well, we are talking about a 1980 movie, so none of our references are going to be timely in this one.
And our audience, I think,
I know.
is old enough to get all those references.
A couple of our audience members will get them, but others might be like, who?
Okay, yeah. If anybody has no idea who Bridget Nielsen was or Danny Bonaducci, feel free to email and I'll explain.
Yeah, there you go. Mike at dodgemediaproductions.com. Or is it Michael? No, it's Mike.
It's Mike.
It's M-I-K-E, yep. It stars Laurence, Olivier, Neil Diamond, and Lucie Arnez. The DP is Isidore Menkovsky. And he was known for The Muppet Movie from 79, Better Off Dead from 85, Somewhere in Time, 80,
Right.
and The Arrival, 96.
What did you do? Oh, that
He was
maybe
deep-
maybe
he was
that's not the same Arrival I'm thinking of.
I know, because that had to have been much, much later, because we took
Yeah,
the
and
boys.
I thought it was a different
and they
DP.
wouldn't have been born in 96.
Okay, it's a different Arrival, but
Yeah.
we'll have to check it out.
Oh, this is The Arrival,
Yeah, who
not
knows?
just Arrival.
Okay. Well,
Let's see. It took place around Brooklyn, around the LA area, Victorville, the Venice Boardwalk, LAX, and Marina Del Rey. And the writer of the screenplay is Herbert Baker. The synopsis for this film is: the son of a Jewish cantor must defy the traditions of his religious father in order to pursue his dream of being a popular singer. I got two taglines for you and Udo.
okay.
Let's see. His story will make you cry. His music will make you sing. His triumph will make you cheer.
Okay, I like the structure of that. Don't think it describes the movie, but okay.
Okay. The next one is: sometimes you have to risk it all. I don't really feel like he risked it all. I mean, he risked his dream,
Well, he
Or-
basically
his relationship with his father.
risked his family maybe. Yeah. See, that's why I didn't like the first one, because I don't think he triumphed.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, but during the movie, one part of our pause count, you paused, and I think I'm Team Rivka. I like his actual wife. I think I identified with her. I felt that he abandoned his family. Yeah, not so big about that,
No, you have a big problem with people who you're all about. If he wanted to follow his dream and he went to her and said, this is what I want to do and I want you to go with me.
Right.
Which he did ask her to go with him, but not like, I think he thought it would just be the 2 weeks. I never felt like he shared with her how deep his desire to be a musician was, unless she Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
She almost seemed like when he said, I'm going to LA for 2 weeks because I finally got this thing, she was like, oh no, please don't. And I think if I knew that was my husband's dream, this is what he's wanted his whole life.
My whole entire life.
I know. I would want to share it with you, and I would go with you.
Or at least have a conversation.
And then cockblock when Lucie Arnez.
Yeah, I know. When she gets her eyeballs on you.
Yeah,
you're like,
I can be there to go, wifey here. Guess what?
Yeah, like, but it's only when they're backstage at the Pantages Theater that we first see that kind of, that tension. So, yeah, I felt like he was not fair to her. Right? That was unfair the way he treated her, in my opinion.
Yes.
And it's possible it wouldn't have worked out because if she's like, look, I just want to live here in Williamsburg and go to the Tabernacle and blah, 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 then maybe he would have had to say, well, that's kind of not my path. Okay, sometimes that happens. But I would say, too, his father, although some people apparently weren't pleased with Sir Laurence Olivier's performance, but I kind of feel like with that character, assuming we buy it, that he really hurt his father and surprised him, right?
Yeah. So he wasn't being honest with anybody.
Right.
Although, I was going to say as you were talking, I felt like she also maybe wasn't being honest, and she was fine, like, find a nice Jewish boy, settle down, and the son of a cantor is, like, next to the rabbi's kid.
Well, he's got some status, right? Not a lot of money, but he's in the community. He's got some respect.
So was she paying attention when because he was obviously playing like rock music and writing pop songs on the side. That doesn't just come out of a vacuum. So he was doing that and she wasn't paying attention.
But I don't know if that's fair to Rivka, though, because a lot of people enjoy their art without wanting to run away from home and make a career of it.
Right. So maybe it's 50-50. He wasn't being entirely honest about his desires, and she wasn't either asking questions or paying attention to the signs around her.
Yeah, I still think she was hoodwinked by him. Team Rivka.
Okay, you're Team Rivka. I watched an interview with Lucie Arnez because she apparently was doing Broadway. Because I believe this was actually her only movie.
Yeah, I don't recognize her from anything else.
I think on her IMDb there are some other movies listed, but I think she's always playing herself. So she's, in like
Fair
documentaries
enough.
about her parents and stuff. So she was on Broadway, and the original director, Sidney Furie, wanted her for this role. And instead, they cast Deborah Raffin, who you would recognize. She's a character actor from the 80s you would totally recognize. She got fired, and they had just hired Sidney to be the director. And he and Neil kind of clashed. And I think what happened is she said that Sidney was a little intimidated by the celebrity and how big Neil Diamond was, because he was huge. He had been, singing for a while, and he was a huge star in the music realm. He wasn't as comfortable in the acting realm, and so when he wasn't delivering dialogue in a way that was good, he would blame it on the script. And so I had read that one of the reasons they fired Sidney Furie is because he kept rewriting the script. Well, he kept rewriting the script because Neil would demand that the script wasn't good. And so when the movie kept getting delayed, the studio fired Sidney and hired Richard. And Richard had a different tact. I think he wasn't as... And so they hired Deborah, and then Sidney got to bring on Lucie. Mm-hmm. And then when Richard came on, the director that is listed, he would just say, I know you don't know how to do this. I'm going to show you how to do this. And he would kind of coach Neil and he would show him how to act. And he would say, like, this character, it's kind of almost like it's you, but I'm going to show you how to act. And so he had a different tact with him. And so I had read that there were some problems with like the direction and even the production as a whole. And I think that the way he came at Neil helped him feel confident in a skill that he really didn't have up until now, and maybe some people would say he never
Right.
and never got it.
The director may have also considered slapping him.
Some have resorted to that.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, that was a long-winded way of, but I just found that really interesting because I had read that this film had some problems, and I felt like the trivia that I read on IMDb, her interview filled in some holes for me at least.
Oh yeah, that does fill in some holes. I think it's interesting because I always have so much respect for not just Broadway but musical theater people because they can do the singing and the dancing and the acting, right? And you don't see a lot of people who are really good at singing transition to acting as well. And I just think because, both it's difficult to be that good at anything, let alone two things at the same time. So, I don't think Neil Diamond's acting was maybe the best, but I don't think it was that bad.
No, I wouldn't.
That wasn't my problem with the film. I wouldn't come away from that film saying like, oh boy, his acting stank. I kind of felt like it was frankly more the writing than it was the acting. So in this case, I may have to take a little bit of Neil's side. It wasn't the best, right? But when you talk about the rewrites, then now who knows why it is what it is. If you've had that many rewrites in the middle of production.
Yeah, when you want to read maybe the original screenplay.
Exactly, yeah.
And I'll claim I picked this film. For some reason, this film has always stood out to me, and I don't know if it was because of the music.
It was the music, I think.
Yeah, because you enjoyed the music throughout the whole, as we watched it this time.
This is like a classic album from Neil Diamond's oeuvre, right?
Yeah.
Many songs on this I recognized. And I remember at the time this movie came out, it was a big deal, but more the music, apparently, than the film.
But I do remember I would have been 9 when this came out, so I must have watched it later. So I was at least a tween. Mm-hmm. I did not feel for Rivka, because I will admit that she was the boring wife, and she just wanted him to stay home. And so I hear you now as an adult, and I see her point. But I think I was rooting for him to go to sunny California and follow his dreams. But it also broke my heart that it came between him and his father, because, I understand the traditions and family, and his father had expectations. But I think also there was probably a little bit of a rebellious teenager in me that was like, yeah, follow your dreams. You don't have to do what your stuffy old dad says.
Yeah, screw the man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm sure I fell into that category. So I will take full either blame or credit for picking this film for this month.
Oh, it's fine. And I had seen it before back in the day and remembered almost nothing of it. Like, I remember the only scene that I kind of remember was when he shows up at the end at the performance to sing with his father. Like, I remember that one, but the rest of it, Bubkas, I knew all the songs, but the rest of the film just...
Right. All right, so kick us off. What is the pickup line of this film?
So, what's the rush?
Is that his father?
His father, which I actually think kind of works.
Yeah, that follows your theory.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the opening cinematography showing New York and all the different immigrants. And I liked how they showed the neighborhood with the Hasidic Jews, but then they also showed, the Asian area and those people working. And then they showed the different...
This is a thing that was more common, I guess, in 80, but I think even before then, or maybe you noticed this, but when they did the man on the street footage, it was worse. You could see the quality of the image was much grainier and coarser for the handhelds that they could take around to the neighborhoods.
Yeah.
But another thing I have mentioned, and I guess, I don't know if this is an edit or cinematography, that kind of image that was on the poster, but it's also the starting and ending title card of Neil Diamond, with his arm up.
Like almost overlays, the Elvis stance?
Yeah, but it overlays on the Statue of Liberty.
Oh, I don't think I ever...
Yeah.
I never saw the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, it was in that. I believe it was the first in the Streets of New York montage. I think it was. They go from that title card. They cut to the image of the statue.
And long opening sequence.
Yeah, minutes. right?
Yeah, it was 3.5.
3.5.
It was our first pause count.
Streets of New York montage.
Long. Yeah. You mentioned focus issues of that montage, so I wonder if that was stock photos or it was just they sent you know, the third AC out and said,
Rivkin, go get us some footage. Okay, boss.
And he's holding the hot dog or a pizza in one hand.
Oh, yeah, that's a great image. And so it's out of focus because he's like spills mustard, and so he looks down and wipes himself, and the camera's like pointed who knows where.
The editor was just screaming obscenities.
Yeah.
There's hardly any footage that's usable.
I brought you a hot dog.
All right. Is there anything else from the cinematography before we get on to a very sensitive writing topic that I have?
Well, I will mention I counted at least 4 separate montages.
Oh, you're right.
We had lots
did.
So we had our opening Streets of New York City. Then we had Jess and Rivka making an album, I said. That doesn't make sense. Maybe Molly. Jess and Molly making the album.
Yeah.
We have, as I listed, making whoopee during Seder montage. And then the last and most humorous is...
Seders would be more popular if
there's more whoopee. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. What was
Excuse me, stooping would be appropriate for our month. And then the last one is very, very comical. Jess is a rambling man.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about
And so he actually, and this goes under costuming, okay, tip of the cap, but they give him the Elvis sunglasses.
There was so many Elvis references.
Yeah. And then they also gave him the kind of stupid cowboy hat, but then his beard grows out to tell the viewer that time has passed.
So the thing, I think I even put it in my notes at one point, and this is very crass, so I apologize, but Elvis died in like 78, 79. I was like, is Neil Diamond making a play for the next Elvis?
Right.
Like, is he like, well, that guy's gone. I'm moving into the spotlight.
The body's cold. It's my turn now.
I mean, or was it just the era and that's how we were marketing? Because there was, even as I was doing research, he's in this like head to toe red jumpsuit that's like glittery.
Yeah. And then in the last scene, he's got the glittery scarf while he's performing.
And then that image that you were speaking of is very reminiscent of Elvis's Vegas show. When he does like the timpani is going and he's... I wish I could think of the song that
would be hilarious if there's like blooper footage of Neil Diamond doing his best Elvis impersonation. Hey, Rivka.
He had the sideburns.
Would you bring me some lemonade?
I never saw any of that. Now, Neil Diamond, I did see an interview. He had just come off of a break. So he would take he was well known for taking these 4 or 5 year breaks where he would just kind of go away and be quiet.
Neil Diamond? So not perform, just count his money?
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Hey, if I had Neil Diamond money, I'd count it too.
And so he had just come back a break. I think it was 76 was his last tour. And so he was on a 4-year break. And then he came back and did this film. And unfortunately, it didn't go well. I mean, spoiler alert.
The film didn't, but the soundtrack did.
The soundtrack did amazing.
Yeah. So he had more money to count. He had to take another break.
All right. So are you ready to step into some dicey writing?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So we're watching the film. I totally forgot about this part.
I have to say, I would have sworn, gun to my head, that this didn't happen. Yeah. And lo and behold, it did.
And I don't understand it, but apparently, so the first Jazz Singer came out in 1927, and Al Jolson played, is it minstrel?
Well, I think they call it minstrel humor. He performed in blackface.
He performed in blackface as a minstrel performer in the original Jazz Singer.
Right.
And it's a story similar to this. I believe he wants to be in the shows, and his father doesn't, wants him to get a decent regular job.
Is his character also Jewish, or was that thrown in for Neil?
I don't know that.
Okay.
It makes kind of some sense.
Who knows? Anyway.
So as a tribute to that, I read in the trivia, as a tribute, the writer or Neil, I thought Anyway, unfortunately, Neil performs in blackface. And I apologize to anybody who would be offended watching this. And I totally forgot about this part and was shocked, honestly, when I saw it. I was just like, oh my gosh.
So we had this conversation. We paused to talk about this.
Another pause count.
Where I think it's different, right, is in the film, some black dudes need a replacement in their band and they ask him to do it.
Yes.
So this is not a case of a white guy trying to make fun of a black guy by being a caricature. However, he's pretty obviously not a black guy.
Yeah.
So we immediately were like, this is a little... And then to give him the afro, which is something that is stereotypically associated with black people.
Yes.
It did feel like, why couldn't they have just had him perform?
Why couldn't a white guy have been in an all-black band?
Right. And I don't know if this is accurate or not, but in the universe, right, the club owner keeps making comments about him being a white guy, and then we have a cameo from
Ernie Hudson
as a black guy in the audience who detects, because they don't do his hands, because apparently they were out of time or out of darker makeup.
Near the end of the song.
Right. Determines that this is a white guy and a fight breaks out.
Yes.
They didn't want him there.
Right.
So that would support...
So it was a black club, apparently.
Right. That would support that maybe there is story justification for this, but even in 1980, I was surprised that they would have done that.
I know. I just don't think we were as aware in 1980.
Well, I mean, I think we were aware that there were racial tensions.
Of course. But I'm saying maybe aware isn't the right word. I don't think we cared. I mean, right. I hate saying we, but, you know. Well, I watched it and didn't have an objection to it then, although I was a teenager.
That's a good point, that we were young people, and maybe if we did think it was a little off, no one would hear our opinion.
Nobody had...
Adults around us would have been like, yeah, so...
Right.
Right?
I mean, Soul Man, there was an entire movie.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah.
That even at the time when that came out, I remember being like, this is an odd thing to do, right? It struck me. Now, maybe if I went back and watched Soul Man, it would have been done with a little more delicacy than I remember.
No, I think it would be offensive if we watched Soul Man.
I'm thinking so, too, because I just remember vividly they also gave C. Thomas Howell the afro. Yeah. And the part that, for me, is it's a stereotype, right?
Yeah.
That they take, whereas the Amanda Bynes, I think it is, she's the man, where she has to pretend to be a boy. I don't remember that being as much. The comedy is her being out of place, not making fun of the person she's impersonating, but I could be wrong. I think of Tyler Perry's work, right? He dresses up as all kinds of crazy things, and it's just slapstick comedy. But I felt like both in the case of the jazz singer and frankly, Soul Man, I was a little uncomfortable with it. It seemed like the only humor was in, oh, look at the black guy.
You know, don't you think that they could have, okay, this black audience isn't going to want a white guy in the band.
Right.
We're going to put you in the back and we're not going to put a spotlight on you.
Or you'll turn around and you'll play your bass facing away from the crowd.
But then somebody discovers you and the fight breaks out.
Right.
I mean, we just solved it and you don't have to break any...
Like you accidentally back into a mic stand, it falls over, you instinctively turn to grab it.
And they see you.
So I think there was ways it could have been done.
Absolutely.
In my opinion. But also to be fair, 1980...
They weren't thinking of that
They
stuff
probably,
like that.
In the writer's room, nobody really made a big deal. It's possible somebody said something, but I feel like, and I'm not defending it, but I feel like at the time, probably most people were less concerned.
I don't think you're defending it. You're contextualizing it.
Yeah.
That sadly, we just...
Right.
We didn't...
And so, and this, on Armchair Podcast, Mike Schur talked about this, how he doesn't think there's anything that can be funny about race. And I have a hard time saying that from both a free speech, but also as a logical perspective. I'm sure there's jokes that can be made about that include race, but I think this to me felt like it was making fun of race, and that I don't think is that funny.
Right. And so like the scenario that we just came up with that they could have used instead, and that's just quickly off the cuff. I mean, something else could have been figured out. It just means that the film would have aged better.
Right.
You know, there are some people that maybe wouldn't watch this film, especially now after hearing us talk about it. They're like, I don't even want to see that.
Well, see, I like that better because it's still the joke is race, but it's his whiteness, which is the punchline.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you needed to have him in blackface to set up that he was a fish out of water, which was the point of that scene.
I was going to ask, was blackface not as triggering, but I feel like just a few years after this, Ted Danson appeared in blackface at the Friars Club, and it was a controversy.
Oh, very much.
I think that the filmmakers could have known that this is going to be an issue.
That's where I felt like that it's possible somebody said something, but then it was overruled.
I mean, is this a case where Neil Diamond? Because I could have swore I read somewhere Neil Diamond wanted to do it as a tribute. And is this where he was kind of swinging around his status?
Okay, so again, the comedy, if you did want to nod to the other, then we have the scene backstage where he says, yeah, but I'm a white guy. That crowd's not going to... And somebody says, oh, well, you could go in blackface. And they're like, oh, no. Okay, what are we going to do? Right?
Yeah.
You could throw in some dialogue there where they acknowledge
the 1927
version, but still not go for it. And like I said, I try not to be super precious about this, but I felt like it wasn't
necessary.
It wasn't necessary because it wasn't contributing to what I see as the point of that scene.
Right.
Whereas you could argue with C. Thomas Howell movie that
the whole premise
the
of
whole
that
premise
movie,
of so now. So we should maybe watch and talk about that movie in a different one. But in this one, it really struck out. Not that I was like so offended that I want to turn the movie off or anything.
But it made us both uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I was surprised because that's not really the tone of the film.
No, not at all.
It just totally didn't. It was like a record scratch sound. It was just like, what's going on here?
Absolutely.
It was weird.
Alrighty. We are going to continue on now I was disappointed. This kind of speaks to when we were talking earlier about Neil Diamond's character. He said, when he was telling Rivka that he goes, I'm going with you or without you. I'm going to LA.
Right. Yeah.
So this was a passion of his. And that's what I'm saying. Either he didn't share with her how deep of a passion it was, or she wasn't paying attention. Or he was a little wooed by the LA part.
Well, I feel like when he gets up in the middle of the night to write "Hello Again" or one of those
Love
songs,
on the Rocks, is that what it was?
One of those. He wrote it on his acoustic guitar in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. You can see she's trying to initiate some boom boom sexy time, and he's pretty standoffish. I feel like he was not into Rivka, and he was looking for a way out.
Oh, was he kind of trying to appease his dad at one point and marry the nice Jewish girl?
Perhaps.
But wasn't satisfied.
And so, gosh, it just dawned on me now. I'm so silly that I am a little sensitive to people who run away to California and screw their spouse.
Not me.
Yeah, no, but
it's not a reference to me.
No, but it's just kind of like, oh, that was rough. Yeah, I very much felt like Rivka was a sympathetic character.
Yeah, definitely she was.
Was she kind of like a Bellamy in that you said something about her being boring?
She's kind of mousy and she has no fire in her. I mean, I feel bad saying it because it definitely sounds like I'm being critical of her, like it's her fault, and it's definitely not. But she didn't help her cause.
Jeez. Okay, so apparently, ladies, you need to be spicy and do yourself up because otherwise the guy's going to move to California.
I'm not saying, but have a little... Now you painted me into a corner.
I kind of did, sorry. But it was comedically necessary. Speaking of...
But don't you think guys do like a little spicy? I'm not saying like your appearance has to be amazing, but you can't just be a drag. Like nobody wants to be around. You want somebody who... like you share common interests, you share common dreams and goals. I'm
going to say...
You have an engaging personality.
There's a nut for every bowl, right? But I was just more saying, just because she was, not like a salsa dancer or cracking wise, there could be someone who just wants someone who listens to their great ideas. Who doesn't want somebody to heckle their ideas.
Absolutely. You're right. For every pot there is a lid, and she needed to go find her pot. her lid.
It's possible again that they were not a good match. I will stipulate, but I still liked her character just fine.
Okay.
But speaking of writing, though, there was a very funny interaction where Molly is trying to get Jess to stay in L.A.
Yes.
And she proposes that he can do the horizontal mambo with her.
Yes.
And he also does not really react. So if they didn't have a child later in the film, I would begin to suspect that he had an injury of some sort where he's not
sterile.
Yeah. But she says, I just offer you my body. And he says, I heard. And then she says, would you rather have a pizza? And I thought that was a great comeback.
You like that?
I did.
I like Lucie Arnez. I mean, I always kind of, she's always kind of a spitfire in whatever I see her in.
Well, she comes from a very funny mother.
Yes, she does.
Right?
Yes.
So I suspect there's some genetics there.
I thought the scene was very good and rang true when he comes into the recording studio early on and he sits down. Now, I don't think it's a great way to have him sit at the piano and sing the song. So the English rocker wants to sing Love on the Rocks, and Love on the Rocks is a ballad. And the guy wants to sing it like a punk song.
And he keeps yelling, faster, faster.
Yeah. And so Neil sits down. That guy would not have sat there for the whole song while Neil sang it. Like, he would have gotten maybe a few bars in and said, okay, fine, chap, but I'm going to sing it fast. So, but it's a great way to try to get Neil to be at the piano and sing this beautiful ballad.
Right.
But I thought what rang true was that the music industry, you hit it big and then they immediately want to change you and your tone and your look. And I've heard different artists speak to, and you've talked about it with like David Spade. Like, one thing gets them in the door, but then immediately the industry wants to change you into something else. Either, you're the cute pop star or...
Right. Well, I feel like for Spade and other actors, I think you get typecast more, whereas, with musicians, it does seem like they instantly want to change you. So it's like, oh, you're this refreshing new voice. Now be like everyone else.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So I thought that rang true for me.
Right. But that's you mentioning that you didn't think it was realistic that the big deal who was in the studio would take a 5-minute break to let this nobody sit down at the piano and sing his
song.
I feel like there's a lot of this film that was unrealistic like that.
Yeah.
And
the mugging.
I was specifically referring to the unironic bicycle built for two shot. Like, there's just no way. But there's others like where she's at the boat and he comes to tell her he really cares for her, and then there's like a garden hose fight where they squirt each other the hose. Of course, I immediately thought of Zoolander's freak gasoline fight accident, but it was just, there was a lot of it that was kind of like that was really, I think, corny. And my question would be, at the time, did the viewers in the theater go, oh, that's kind of a little corny, or did it land? Because I think the beginning of Three's Company had a bicycle built for two shot in it.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. It totally did. Yeah. Well, that was during, I think, one of the montages, right? I just briefly mentioned she jumps in the car of a studio executive and pretends to hold him up in like the worst threatening way.
Right.
Like, she literally takes her hand and puts it in her pocket.
The old finger gun trick.
and the guy like literally looks a little scared, and he's like, okay.
Well, he's seen Get Smart. He knows that the finger gun exists.
So that was a little, plus I think if you finally find out that somebody isn't in fact mugging you, now you're just like, get the hell out of my car.
Yeah, he reacted really calmly to the,
okay, I'll listen to your mixtape.
Okay, this is how I'll let you audition for a job, is by pretending to commit a violent crime on me.
And then I'll sign your actor or your artist.
Okay, all those other people that tried to negotiate with me, they go to the back of the line, but the mugger's right to the front.
Now, why didn't they have her do like, she's a cute girl. She totally could have been like...
Yeah, she didn't offer...
Like, her body.
yeah, she offered her body to Neil, but not to Eddie Gibbs, the record producer. She's not a very good manager. That guy from Fire Island would have figured out how to make that work.
And then, fast forward to the big concert.
Big concert.
Rivka comes out to be a supportive wife.
I like it.
A little late, Rivka. She goes backstage and introduces herself to Molly.
Yes.
And Molly tells her,
right,
I've offered him my body.
Sure.
And they both laugh.
So my notes were the acting of that tension was good. The writing, not so much.
Not so good. If somebody told me that they've been alone with you for a couple months, I would say at this point, at least 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And they offered you her body.
That happens all the time.
The last thing I'm going to do is chuckle about that. Sister, we're having words.
Okay. So let's turn this on its ear. Was Rivka laughing because she's like, awesome.
I'm gonna cut you.
Then I'm going to get such good alimony because I've got evidence for
and
infidelity.
I'm married, so I'm going to wait till he hits it big, and then I'll divorce him.
Cha-ching. That was what she was laughing about, maybe?
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
She's thinking, me and your old Cantor dad, we're going to live in good, like live behind the hog back in New York City on your dime, mister.
I did think it was good acting. His dad comes out, maybe not for that concert.
It was a little before then.
Yeah. And his dad comes out, and as he walks in the door of their house, he puts his hand up on the door jamb.
Where there would have been.
Should have been.
According to him.
A mezuzah.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really subtle, but yet well done.
Yeah, it was good acting.
And so I wonder, was that in the script, or did Olivier...
Yeah.
I just really, really like that.
You know, it's funny. You mentioned it was really good acting. He's not really known for his acting, though.
Olivier?
As being so.
Oh, sorry, you were so deadpan.
Yeah, I sold it too well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a line there, though, from that visit that I really liked, where Jess says, like, oh, I'm just trying to find myself. Mm-hmm. And he says, does finding yourself include leaving your wife? Ooh, burn!
Right.
But I think that would make sense, both from a parental standpoint, but also as, like, a conservative Jewish person.
Yeah.
Right?
I think I remember this film because of the part that comes right after that.
Yeah.
That the father realizes that Jess is not going to do what he says, and he's going to follow his dream. And he's so angry at him that he rips his collar.
Yeah.
And so he leaves, and Molly says, what just happened?
Right.
And Jess explains that, is it after somebody dies,
you
rip cloth, I believe? And so basically by ripping his collar, his father was saying, you're dead to me.
Right. I think also, and perhaps some of our Jewish listeners could correct me if I get this wrong, I think also ash on the forehead was another tradition of Judaism for when somebody died, along with the ripping of the clothes.
Oh, that's interesting.
I thought that was it, but I could have got
Ash
that wrong.
Wednesday.
Maybe that was totally the Catholics,
different.
Right? Maybe I got it wrong, but I thought there's ash involved there too.
I remember that scene. I think because as a child, to have your father kind of basically disown you, like, you're not going to do what I say, you're dead to me.
Right.
Oof.
Okay, now there should be a service only available to those of us in the movie podcasting industry.
Yeah.
But, not the lay person.
Okay.
But where we can look up by movie the Sickle and Ebert review.
Oh, it's online.
Yeah, okay. That's YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's YouTube.
Because I'm curious, I feel like that scene where Olivier was one of the ones that they would have put in the review.
Definitely. I can't remember. I don't think I watched it, but I think I will put it in the show notes if it was. Oh, yeah. It would, of course, be for this film. Duh. Not last week's film. I do so much research,
Actually, you do an amazing amount of research, which I think is funny because I've tried to spin it like a bonus, but I'm just lazy. I don't do anything. I just show up like, hey, what are we watching today?
Yeah, you watched the movie with me.
I do.
Well, I want it to be a valuable podcast for our listeners.
Right. But I do pay attention during the movie. I try to really watch the images, listen to the sound, really think about it.
And my last thing under the writing before we head into... Oh, I do have the montage in the editing. Before we head into the editing is when he comes back after he's been a rambling man.
Yeah.
This baby looks to... Because she got pregnant and she has a baby.
Right. We presume by him.
Yes. Oh, well, we know it's him because they had been together and she tells the sound engineer that she's pregnant. Remember?
Well, she said she's pregnant, but we don't know what she's done with Eddie Gibbs to get his album made.
No, we know it's Jess's. And speaking of which, little trivia.
Yeah.
That same day, Lucie Arnez herself found out she was pregnant.
Oh, fantastic.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
So
Did she name the baby Jess?
I don't think so.
Huh. Well.
So he rambles. She has the baby. The baby looks to be 9 or 10 months. So he's been gone 18 months.
Yeah, he's been gone a very long time.
And she turns around and almost intuitively feels him watching her. He's on the porch of their house and she's out on the beach.
She has enough midichlorians that she could sense him
She
back there.
could sense something. She turns around. There he is.
Deadbeat dad that's been gone for a year and a half to 2 years.
Months.
Right.
And she embraces him and they hug the baby.
He's a rambling man.
Oh my gosh. I don't like fathers who RUNOFT.
Well, and he just shows up like nothing had like
Bygones.
Right. If like he, prostrated himself, threw himself down and begged her forgiveness, that may be one thing, but it's just like, yeah, I had to find myself. I needed some time on the road.
I went out for some cigarettes and I came back 18 months later.
Well, do you have the cigarettes? I forgot. I'll be right back.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. No. So
he could have at least shown up with flowers, and then she could say, or she should have said, "You don't bring me flowers
anymore." Well, he has a child. Did he not know?
As the script would show her, I took it as he rambled before he found out.
Right, but then
maybe
his buddy from the band, Bubba, found him, and so I presume that would be information that Bubba would share. Like, you have a 9-month-old son, and he's like, oh crap. So he doesn't show up with anything for the kid, which I think would be fairly normal, even if you didn't know kind of what to get a 9-month-old, like a stuffed animal.
Exactly.
Some sort of recognition that oh my gosh, this is my firstborn son.
This is what brought me back, yeah.
Oh, and wait, did you get him circumcised? Like, so there's, you would think there would maybe be a few questions about the son, the offspring.
Absolutely.
So this is where I had a little problem with the writing in the film.
Well, and you would probably further have problems because of the whole infidelity, knocked up another woman, all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm kind of particular about only impregnating people that, you've got some sort of commitment to raise the child. And here he's demonstrating the exact opposite of that. She gets pregnant and he beats feet.
Right.
And he's gone forever.
Great father.
Yeah. I mean, I don't hold it against Neil, but that character's not my favorite.
Right. I think that the sets played a really good kind of role in informing the story, because you have these tight, small tenement apartment buildings where it's wet and cold in New York City, and then you compare that to sunny California, and she lives on the Venice Boardwalk. And speaking of Venice Boardwalk, I have to say I am going to include in the show notes a clip to a blooper. But what is additionally funny about the scene with the baby is there's a scene where his father shows up, and in the background you see the boardwalk, and there are a good smattering of people on the beach, and the boardwalk is teeming with bicyclists and skateboarders,
roller skaters and skateboarders and walkers
and people walking. And there is a little accident that they left in the film.
Oh, it's great.
Two people on the path in different modes of transportation collide, basically.
Yeah, we're going to make the listeners go watch it.
That's what I said. I'm going to put it in the show notes.
Yeah, we're not going to tell you anymore.
So you can enjoy it. But then compare that to this scene where he shows up to see the baby, and there's no one on the boardwalk.
It's
and the entire beach is empty. It's only her and the baby.
Sunset on Venice Beach, and no one is there?
I don't
Of
think
the millions who live in LA, nobody decided.
nobody was walking their dog that day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
it's hilarious.
okay. But speaking though of the sets, but starting with Venice,
Yeah.
this is something about me.
Okay.
So she has a house which is ridiculously large, and thus I have no idea how she's going to be able to afford a house that large on the beach in Venice. Let's forget about that.
She inherited it, let's say.
Maybe she inherited it from
Her father.
her father, Lucie Arnez. And in there's like a kitchen area, and he goes in to take a phone call or something. And in the background, on top of like the microwave or something, there's a model car. Like what a car aficionado would get, like the 1/30th scale. This is my favorite. I loved this Mercury Cougar. What? Like that doesn't make any sense to me that she would have that as decor in her house. At no point. Oh well, no, she did wear a lot of jumpsuits, so maybe she was into cars.
She's a grease monkey on the
Yeah,
side.
I guess. But the other part of the sets which I liked from when he was in Texas, right, is he goes in to get a job at a bar, and a guy says, play me something like "You Are My Sunshine" or something like that. But in the background, screen left on the wall, is a gun rack. Fair enough. That holds like 10 rifles. So I think, they're telling us this is Texas, because instead of the normal 3-gun gun rack, we've got the 10-gun gun rack. So I was like, okay, the people doing sets must have had fun. Or did the location scout go into that bar and say, we have to use this one?
I think the latter.
I had a thing on costumes.
Yeah, tell me.
So they never explained, and I couldn't find online any explanation for why this would be. Only Jess. The other characters are fine, but Jess, the size of the yarmulkes he wore varied greatly. Some of them looked to be about the size of a beer coaster, and others looked to be
like the size of a dinner plate?
Yeah, a complete hat.
Yeah.
And every time he put one on, it was a different size.
Interesting.
And I paid attention. So his fathers
These are
were
the kind
normal.
of things that you need to tell me about so I can do some research.
Well, it's also interesting for the listener.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Under sound, I'm going to tell you that I found it bumped me the scene you mentioned early on where he gets up from not having sex with
Rivka.
And he plays an acoustic guitar in the living room, mind you, in this small tenement building.
Tiny apartment.
And I thought, okay, I know it's an acoustic guitar, but that would wake people up. Like you're keeping your wife and your father up.
Yeah, I would say it would at least wake up your father. Yeah.
And maybe it's, I mean, I'm sure it's nice to hear kind of like music in the background, maybe while you're trying to go to sleep, but...
I did think about this as well.
Okay.
I've always been a fan of people who are musical.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm not musical myself is because it requires lots and lots of practice where you don't actually play the song, you make mistakes.
Yes.
So I'm thinking perhaps, so it's not just that his dad hears a song. His dad hears him halfway through the song, or trying out different chords. And so it's not like music. It's practice music.
Practice.
And I'm thinking it's midnight and you got to sing tomorrow in the tabernacle, and then suddenly he gets up and he's playing again and again and again, like get the song right or do it when the sun's up, right?
So under sound, I also wanted to mention that Neil, a big part of why he wanted to do this movie is he was tasked with composing and singing 10 new songs for the film, and they were recorded live for the film for the movie. Oh, that's another little fun photo that I will include in the show notes, because when I was watching one of the featurettes about making the movie, what do you do when you're filming and you need to slate? Because as we saw in the film that we worked on a couple weeks ago, even 6 feet away, depending on the depth of field of the lens you're using, the person that was slating had to move closer to the camera to get it, so that, and slate.
Right.
So if you're shooting an arena where there's going to be a concert, and you generally will have cameras kind of in the back area behind the audience, how do you slate that? And so I found a photo that just tickled me because it's a full-size adult, and they have what looks to be like a 3-foot by 4-foot
Yeah.
slate, maybe.
Standard poster board.
Yeah. and he had the big clapper. So I'll include that photo because it made me laugh. And so,
Yeah,
but it makes sense that you would have to have a slate that big so that the cameras in the back can.
Right. And then in my mind's eye,
Yeah.
I see that morning at about 7:30, they're all milling about in the parking lot as people are rolling up and stuff. And the AD goes to the grips and says, "We need a giant slate."
Right.
And they just blink at him like, "Okay, boss."
Which now, I wonder, I don't think they would need that now because now the new fancy slates are all wirelessly controlled.
Oh.
And when you clap it, it syncs with the recordist. That's why, folks, if you've seen what a lot of people call clapper and we're calling a slate, in the old days, you would write on them this scene and the take and everything. And now you've probably seen them. The modern ones have rolling. They have an LED.
LED.
Okay, yeah, an LED. And the numbers are rolling. And then when they clap it, it goes
Right.
to all zeros.
And
they're wirelessly connected to the recordist equipment.
I do not remember the name, so I apologize if I'm not broadcasting for somebody, but there is at least one manufacturer that makes little devices that work with both the sound and camera
Yes.
to synchronize them.
Yeah.
So you don't really even need the audio clap to
Correct.
synchronize them in post. And I don't think it's that hard because the Creative Suite has a way to do that. But I read about this, and the guy who was using it said it's actually super duper awesome.
Yeah.
Worth the money, in his opinion. So a lot of this stuff was, back when we had film
Right.
and all these different things. And now with the digital age, maybe we move away from that a little, but it is fun to see him with the poster board size clapper.
Yeah, so
That's
I'll
pretty
include
awesome.
that. But it's interesting because while doing press for the film, Neil Diamond said that he finds movie making special because musicians are telling a story, and he thought it was another way to include kind of a storytelling aspect through song. And he said it's been a natural progression for a lot of singers like Bing Crosby, Frank Sinatra, Elvis Presley. They all did it. Helen Reddy, Bette Midler, Barbra Streisand, Kris Kristofferson, they were in films, and it's had a pretty good success rate. So by making a movie, we allow our music to reach countless millions because there could be a bigger audience. Didn't go so well for Neil.
No,
In the sense that the film didn't do well, but I do, like you said, the soundtrack is amazing.
right. Yeah, he's no Bing Crosby, but that's okay. Bing is a Pacific Northwester, so,
Yes, you're very proud of. And AFI includes it in the list of 400 movies nominated for the top 100 greatest music movies.
Okay, I could live with that for
America.
music, yeah.
I think that might be specifically for the song America.
Yeah, and that's kind of the highlight of the film. That's the one most associated with it, I think.
Yes. And then at my last note under sound is I love a good string swell. And near the end, when his father and him make up, I notice that the strings come in and they swell to a
Right.
crescendo.
And nice foreshadowing for our upcoming episode of The Holiday, because I do believe that Jack Black plays a cinematic music person
I think
in
you're
that
right.
film.
Yeah.
Good job. Way to
Yeah.
set that up.
Alrighty. I don't believe so, but did we have any head trauma?
I have only in the scene that they have to go
Oh.
watch on the YouTubes.
Oh, yes. Oh, but the bar fight, there would have been a smattering of different people.
Yeah, I did.
Not our lead, maybe.
It was more like a good time Old West saloon bar fight in
Yeah.
that it's just almost like it's not a scrum. People say a scrum, but a scrum is a very organized thing. It's more like a ruck or a mall technically. I don't know if anybody was on the ground, but yeah, it was just kind of a big blob.
Yeah. Okay. We had a smoochie,
Smoochy, smoochy, smoochy.
and we had more than a smoochie because we have a baby.
Well, spoiler alert, maybe some of our listeners weren't aware of how that worked. But yes, Jess and Molly have a celebratory kiss at 52:54, and then some celebratory other activities later. And then he run off.
Okay. In his rambling montage, did that elicit some driving?
So, yeah, I have a little bit of driving review. First of all, I want to say early on in the background as maybe a Favreau, but there's a nice maroon 60s era Dodge van. So it's good to see them put one of ours in the background. That was nice. Uh-huh. When she pretends to mug the music producer Eddie Gibbs, he's driving a gray 1980 Lincoln Continental. And that was always kind of the top trim line for the Ford. GM had Cadillac and the Lincoln Continental was. So it says to us, wow, this guy he's really, he's cheap because he has this expensive car. But then later he has the Rolls Royce, which says that he's really rich now that Jess he's taken him under his wing. So maybe that's why he let her mug him, because it was lucrative. So then when he goes rambling, he gets a 65 Ford Mustang convertible. It was such a unique color, so I looked up the paint codes for that year, and I think that was called silver blue. I think that was the color that they had. Mm-hmm. But how cool is he? It runs out of gas and he just abandons his new Mustang on the side of the road.
I was stunned by that.
Like, really? That's like, first of all, you can't get gas, but then when it runs out of gas, you couldn't get a gas can and bring it back?
Right?
You just abandon a new car on the side of the road. That makes no sense.
That newfound wealth, I guess.
And then when he's in the studio, right, and he has his little hissy fit, and he goes outside and he gets in the car. And I want to say, always wear your seatbelt, but also maybe don't run down a cop. He swerves directly at a police officer on foot. Okay, so that's her driving review.
Big mistake.
Big, huge.
Shall we go to the numbers?
Let's go to the numbers.
Okay, one little trivia that I wanted to share with you before we head straight into the numbers, but they're numbers adjacent, is though this movie was one of the top 300 highest grossing films in North America in 1980, earning $27 million.
Ooh.
Sir Lou Grade, who invested in the movie, stated that the box office results were disappointing and that his company failed to recoup their advertising and distribution costs. And as you reported, the soundtrack album made more than the film.
Right.
So the budget for this film was $13 million. And it brought in 27, as I said, which adjusted for today would be like 89 million.
So the budget was half of the gross. So Sir Lou needs to run a better business because that's a lot of money to lose on advertising.
Yeah. I mean, I have heard that the marketing can sometimes be as much as the film, which just sounds bananas to me.
Yeah.
It got a 5.8 out of 10 on IMDb. Critics did not like this film.
Oh, yeah.
23% of critics said it was a good movie.
So 77 were Team Rivka?
Very much so. So that is rotten.
That's rotten.
Now, audiences, on the other hand, which I'm sure a lot of Neil Diamond fans went and saw this. And this is pre-internet, so it was just word of mouth from your friends.
Right.
They gave it a 69%. So they liked it a little, quite a bit more.
Neil Diamond he's a personality, so it makes sense.
Uh-huh. This one is a longer one. You got to settle in. It's just under 2 hours at an hour 55 minutes. It's rated PG. It's labeled as a drama, music, romance. It comes from the EMI Films. Now, this was an award-winning film. Did you know that?
I did not.
Okay. This film won quite a few Razzies.
Oh, those aren't the good ones.
Those aren't. So in 1981, Neil Diamond won for Worst Actor.
Oh.
I know, that hurts. Laurence Olivier won for Worst Supporting Actor. It was nominated for Worst Picture, Worst Director, and Worst Original Song for You Baby Baby.
Okay, that's not a good song, so I can support that.
Wah, wah.
Wah, wah. Yeah.
I still enjoyed watching it.
I like the songs.
Yeah. Let's see. So it's available on Amazon or Apple for $3.99. Unfortunately, it's not on a streaming service right now, but those things change, and all those streaming services add and subtract from their catalog. Yeah. So with that, enjoy this month. I'm going to include my Noodle Kugle recipe.
Fun.
Because I love a Noodle Kugle. And I just have decided I'm going to give you a recipe each week.
Huh. Sounds fun to me.
Happy Hanukkah to all of our Jewish listeners and anybody who celebrates Hanukkah.
I think this will drop before Hanukkah begins.
It will drop. It will drop before that date. So be ready on December 18th to wish your friends Happy Hanukkah.
All right.
And never forget,
Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.
Thanks for listening to Dodge Movie Podcast with Christy and Mike Dodge of Dodge Media Productions. To find out more about this podcast and what we do, go to dodgemediaproductions.com. Subscribe, share, leave a comment, and tell us what we should watch next. Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.